Welcome to Clean Plates, where every bite tells a story. I'm Brian Romaine, joining you on a culinary journey to understand the whys behind our diets and desires. I'm Brian Romaine, joining you on a culinary journey to understand the whys behind our diets and desires. Joining with me today is Ryan McGuire. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. Just happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on and just opening up yourself to have this conversation with me. So just a little bit about you. You are someone who teaches people survival skills. If that's an easier, like a broad way to put it, as well as you're also very involved with the outdoors.
Yeah, I think that's a fair description. I teach wilderness skills, and teach people how to be more comfortable and capable in the backcountry.
No, absolutely. Just because your content is very inspiring in the fact of how hard you push yourself. You have a couple of records, and you have a Guinness Book of World Records now with being the person who has spent the most time on an air bike in 24 hours, I believe, is the description, if I'm not mistaken.
Furthest distance on an air bike in 24
furthest
hours.
Distance.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Time spent, furthest distance, absolutely. I mean, I remember watching the journey within itself is incredible, and it was something you said you'll never do again. So I think it's, if somebody really wants to beat that record, they are going to really have to try.
Yeah, man. I do a lot of wild shit, and that one was of the more painstaking for sure. And I think it's a pretty competitive record. Funny story about that. You were mentioning if somebody else were to go for it. The record that stood when I attempted it was 395 miles. And
wow.
I ended up doing, the plaque is across the room for me, 426.9. So I beat it by a good chunk. And another gentleman actually attempted it at the same time. And he beat the standing world record, but he hadn't beaten 426.9. He didn't beat the mark that I set. So he actually beat the world record, but never got to be the world record holder. So
yeah, no, that's wild, just because I think that it teaches people a lesson in how hard you can push the body, how like what is the limit of a human? Because I feel like with your recent adventure, I'm blanking on where you just were in the desert. You were like somewhere like not Dubai, but like very much in the Middle East, I believe.
It was Saudi Arabia, Alula, Saudi Arabia, and then Dubai.
Okay,
afterwards.
Cool. So I knew you were in Dubai at one point, but still, that's pretty impressive just to be able to have the mindset to be like, all right, well, I've ran races, I've mountain biked, I've been in the wilderness. Let's go to the desert and see how that plays out. So, dude, props to you, man. I mean, that's huge. How to absolutely. How does nutrition play a part in all of this stuff that you do? Because with being in such limited resources, it seems like you are somebody who has actually been able to thrive off of like the land and what exists out there, which I think we've gotten really far away from. I think people have lost a complete relationship with their food in general, but you are somebody who has seemed to do the exact opposite.
Yeah. I wasn't raised that way by any means. I grew up in an area where it was fast food and Twinkies and Little Debbie's and stuff like that. And from a very early age, I was very interested with being able to identify plants and also to harvest meat. But it wasn't something my parents were into. I tell this story sometimes, but I remember getting in trouble for killing fish because I was eating them. Like I was like 8, and my dad said, like, we don't kill things. Like, how do you want your steak cooked tonight for dinner? And I'm like, you know, what is something's not adding up here. So as I got older, I pursued situations in which I could get closer to my food, whether that be working on homesteads, taking month-long walks in the bush with little to no food, and yeah, just deepening my relationship with where my calories were coming from.
I think that's really inspiring in the fact that it's not really only just you having a relationship with the land for the food, but you have a relationship with the land for the land. I see there's a lot of things that you do with earthing and grounding yourself constantly. I mean, you're somebody who I think wears shoes only if you're like forced to wear shoes. You do a lot of Earth Runners. I think is that the brand that has like the copper, and then there's like silver lining and the lacing that helps you ground with the earth, as well as like zeros or anything that I see you running in. It's always a choice of something that is A, minimalist, and B, something that's not actually covering the barrier of your foot. So I think that's really inspiring because there's a lot of relationship that people have also lost, I think, with touching the land and getting out into the earth itself and like feeling what Mother Nature is giving you and how you can use that as like a real resource. So double props to you for really showing that to people and growing an audience of people with your podcast, as well as your, social media pages that you're showing people how to actually do that. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, the barefoot thing, I always liked being barefoot my whole life, but I never really put two and two together. I actually had a giant cyst kind of tumor thing in my foot that broke my foot in half. And I had a lot of foot pain and a really hard time running until I kind of went to a more minimalist approach and kind of developed that more minimalist style of running. And a lot of that happened in the backcountry. So I guess a little bit of background, like I didn't really compete at the level that I compete now until just a couple years ago. I feel like the high level competition, especially with running, kind of came from the backcountry. So I was going on wilderness trips. I was trying to get as deep in the backcountry as possible. And one thing you learn very quickly about that lifestyle is the number one barrier is your ability to move on your feet, to be efficient moving through the backcountry. And I think that's what stops most folks from getting really deep and having those experiences. So I think of locomotion on your feet as being like the first survival skill. And when I started getting into that, the primitive sandals or the more low tech shoes seemed to be more sustainable and let my feet kind of do what they needed to. And instantly I was able to go much further than I ever had previously.
I think that speaks volume, because there's something to the fact that if you're taking care of your actual whole body, it's the inside that will kind of reflect that as well. Because, what you eat definitely makes a difference, but how you're moving and how you're really like doing these primitive type of, workouts and things that keep your body very like 360, it seems. It seems that there's not like one point that if you find that's weaker, you'll find a way to kind of do a very natural approach to it. You're almost like a human, like cheetah or something, it's pretty insane, dude. But explain to me how you prepare yourself to, like, I guess, what is the fuel for all this? Because are you taking food with you, or are you just solely going out into the wilderness as much as you can to find ways such as, I don't know, mushrooms or hunting food yourself? Because I see a lot of content of you getting miles in as far as like hunting or attempting to hunt. I'm not saying you don't like kill anything. It's just that I don't think people understand that hunting is a lot of not killing versus like overkilling. People think you're going out and getting like, they have no idea about limits, and you're only killing the one buck hopefully for the whole season if you get the tag. So explain to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think the first question was like whether or not I take food
exactly
on back trip. And the answer is it depends. So like on a lot of trips, it'll be kind of a hybrid approach where I'll have some rations and we'll also be hunting, fishing, foraging along the way. I also do solo trips every year, maybe quarterly or biannually, and I will take no food. Those are kind of just things that I do by myself, and oftentimes I'll build a vision fast into that where I sit in one spot for anywhere from like 24 to 72 hours and I won't eat at all, and I'll just fast. I'll try and stay awake as much as I can. I won't really even drink that much water. And that's just kind of a ceremony I do to break down and think about my life. And then I'll also do kind of like a more dynamic version of that where I'll do a walkabout or a runabout, and I'll just kind of be fishing, foraging, hunting along the way. So the answer is it depends. I also just go camping with my friends and, eat cheeseburgers and do all that stuff too. I don't think like a lot of people think like, oh, this guy like practices like survival skills or he's really into this or that, so he must like shun everything about the modern world. And it couldn't be further from the truth,
I think that's a really good balance that people like to hear, because there's the option that you're always going to, have with people if you're in a certain setting that, like you just said, eat some burgers that you guys grilled up, but it's not like you're, going crazy with it or having ultra processed foods or, high sugar intake, anything like that. So you still stick to a pretty healthy regimen and things. But again, it's pretty sweet that the iron sharpens iron concept of just the more you do it as far as going out in the wilderness and having these biannual trips where you're figuring out how to forage, I think says something to a large audience of people, because there's not enough education out there on like what you can and can't eat and like what is safe and how to prepare things in the woods. So I think that's really cool that you're taking into this, like, this you're teaching people how to do this stuff, and you're taking people who have never been in the woods before or people who have experience, and you're just showing them a cooler way to approach and like how to look at the land.
Yeah, and I'm also learning. I'm sharing skills that I've developed or I've learned from my mentors. But every time I'm in the woods, I'm learning something new. I'm learning a new plant that I didn't know that grew in this certain area, or a different way to use this type of ponderosa bark, or a different type of fish that's more resilient in cold water and more active during this time of the year. I'm always just trying to pay attention to my surroundings, and I'm learning every time I'm out there. So there is no point of arrival, like especially when it comes to being a naturalist. It's the most expansive subject ever to exist in human history. So there's no way that you have all the answers. And if you're seeking out someone that says they have all the answers, go the other way, because that person is lying to you.
No, I think that's very wise for you to point that out, that like, you're not the guru. You're not anything more special than anybody who's just trying a little harder, I guess. And it's not even really like a comparison thing. It's just that you are someone who, you use the word naturalist. I think that that's a really key thing that people can listen in on, because it says it right there. You are kind of like the using the natural world to use its resources, as opposed to, take. It's almost like what you do has a practice of giving back to the earth as well as taking from it.
Yeah. And that's what I try to teach in my courses, is like theories of positive impact. So in today's world, you're told if you get off trail, you'll destroy the environment. And if you pick up a stick, it's going to, mess up the way the trees decompose. And if you interact in any way, you're going to negatively affect the environment that you're in. But in many ways, being bipedal mammals, there's a lot of ways that we can positively affect the environment as well, especially when you look at it on a personal, like a personal or like a tribal level. On an industrial level, yes, we often do damage. But like if it's just a small tribe of people, we can actually really make a positive impact.
I think that's really cool. So I like the point that you just spoke on. How do you feel about what the direction has gone with just the industrial revolution and like the word diet versus how we can, as a tribe of people in our smaller communities, make a more positive impact as kind of a one unit?
Are you speaking specifically like towards
yes,
food?
Just because like with food, it seems like we've kind of gone off the trails a little bit, and it seems like you're able to see just kind of like what it's like as a smaller tribe versus I want to hear your opinion on what you think the world is doing,
Yeah, I think getting closer to your food is the first step, which is a very broad spectrum that people just like to say on social media. One way you can do that is to be part of a slaughter or a kill or do one yourself. I think getting your hands dirty and seeing the life leave a body of a mammal or other animal is a very important thing that we've completely lost out on. And I think that lack of connection leads to things like factory farming and mindless meat eating. I'm a meat eater, but I like to say that I, in many ways, have more in common with vegans than I do mindless meat eaters, because I think that there's a rift that's kind of widening between most human beings and where their food is coming from.
Yeah, I mean that just even kind of gave me chills what you just said, because you just saying that you can relate more to a vegan versus someone who's a mindless meat eater, because I kind of feel guilty within myself, because there's a lot of times in my life where I've been a mindless meat eater just because there's no connection to the kill versus me just paying the grocery store price for the kill, not actually participating.
Yeah, but I don't think you have to participate every time. I think you just need to have some level of consciousness related to it. Like I wouldn't put you in the mindless meat eater category at all, because you've been a butcher, what it's like to take apart an animal and okay, here's the scapula, I'm going to make this cut this way, and I'm going to peel back this layer of fat and pull off the silver skin. Like this is a human, or this is just like a human. Like I'm pulling these muscles apart. These muscles exist on a human as well. Like this is a real living being, and you have that experience. Now there's studies that there's literally children that are like 10, 11 years old, and they don't know where meat comes from. Like they're that disassociated. They don't know that meat comes from animals. That is easy level of disillusionment.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I guess I was just talking about like in my lifetime, like before I butchered and everything like that, just like all the fast food that I've eaten and all the things that I've done just throughout teenage and young adult years. It just makes me think in retrospect of like where that shift started to happen, and like I grew up in a family of hunters. It's just that it's, interesting to just put it in the perspective that you just said, where if you were to show some sort of diagram to a 10 or 11-year-old and you're like, what is this? And they're like, well, that's that. But they don't know that that's where meat comes from. Is just, that's such a wild concept, because I'm sure they know like what a cow is or what a chicken is, but they probably only know the noise that it makes versus the thing that it by produces. So that's a pretty interesting point, just to put it into that perspective. So like now currently with your clients, do you have different like things that you incorporate for nutrition into your teachings to survive in the wilderness?
Yeah. There's a variety depending on the course. So this year coming up, I have 4 courses, 3 that are open to the public. And the first one is a wilderness skills course. The second is a yoga and earth skills course. And the third one is a primitive running course. So all 3 of those, the food will look a little different, but all 3 of them will involve foraging off the land. So identifying wild plants for both food and medicine. An interesting example of how this shifts is like for the primitive runner, we'll be doing traditional pinole, which is like a ground corn mix that was used by the Tarahumara throughout the Copper Canyons. And that'll kind of be our fuel on the go. So we'll still be, maybe fishing, hunting, foraging, that kind of thing, but we'll have this pouch of pinole moving through the land and using that as like your quick calories to keep you going on the running course.
No, I think that's really cool that you offer people kind of tiers of things to do, where there's like the X experience, the Y experience, and the Z experience. And that's great because there's some people who will kind of read the, description of the class and they'll be like, oh, well, I'm way too, like inexperienced to do that. Or, oh, that'll fit just right for me because I'm looking to up my skills into that way, or dialing it back for somebody who's just like, look, I've never done this, but I'm really enthusiastic and I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And so,
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just like the lack of confidence that folks have in themselves. And they think that like literally all 3 of those courses, just about everyone that you and I know could handle any of those courses. None of them are like above your pay grade in terms of like difficulty or challenge. It's really more just like the fear of the unknown. So like this thing feels so unknown to so many people that they talk themselves out of the experience.
This episode is brought to you by MyFitFoods. Are you struggling to find healthy, delicious meals that fit your lifestyle? Do you live in Colorado? Well, look no further than MyFitFoods. At MyFitFoods, they believe that healthy eating should be convenient and flavorful. Their chefs prepare balanced, nutrient-rich meals that are ready to enjoy whenever you are. Whether you're looking to lose weight, build muscle, or simply maintain a healthy diet, they've got you covered. Imagine having a fridge full of tasty meals that are perfectly portioned and tailored to your nutritional goals. No more meal prep, no more guesswork, just grab, heat, and eat. Look, I've got a busy lifestyle, whether it's podcasting, working my other jobs, or just maintaining my healthy lifestyle by working out 2 to 3 times a week. And MyFitFoods has got me covered. And they've got a special deal just for you. Healthy eating has never been this easy. So head over to myfitfoods.com and use the code MyFit40Den at checkout to get a whopping 40% off your first order. That's myfitfoods.com and use the promo code MYFIT40DEN at checkout for 40% off your first order. So why wait? Start your journey to a healthier you. Fuel your best and feel your best one meal at a time with MyFitFoods. There's so many excuses and so many things that people will put in front of them as a barrier. Kind of like what I was telling you earlier with me even just starting this podcast, is that there's so many things that I could tell myself why I shouldn't do this, but I'm just like, no, I'm going to just have these conversations and open up this book for people, because I think food is so important that there's so many aspects to it that I could talk to a different person every single day about food and still have my mind blown, because it's, no matter what box you put it in, you still got to eat. You still have to put something in your body to sustain yourself, whether it's a small amount, a large amount, or whatever it is that you think you need. But I just think we've gotten away from this whole idea of thumbprint to thumbprint, person to person, what is going to be sustainable for them, because there's not enough of this like nice like Goldilocks spot where there's too many people that overeat and then there's too many people who are starving. And so there's just, and then you got us who are just living smack dab in the middle of it, where we work hard, but we also aren't just ultra privileged and living through Silver Spoon Lane. So it's hard for me, because I try to like keep the emotional side of it intact and just pray that humanity wakes up a little bit, because there's too many people, I think, like also just spreading the wrong message. You know, there's too many people who are like the ultra influencer or the super important people like the Kardashians or something, where for some reason there's billions of people that like enjoy them, and then they'll go and say something like Beyond Meat is the way to live. So it's hard, because then you have people that believe that seed oils and ultra processed food and things that look like food because it tastes like something is going to be the best option for you. So that's where I'm just happy to have this conversation with you, because I think you're somebody who is a voice in a large audience of people that people listen to when it comes to the knowledge that you have, as far as like your wilderness courses go and the education that you tell people online, and your podcast. Your podcast is very, very informative for people who are listening.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just one piece that came to mind when you were saying that is, when you're in the wilderness, everything slows down, right? You don't have a cell phone and like you don't have anywhere to be, which if you haven't had that feeling, most of us don't get that feeling in the front country. There's always somewhere to be. We always have something to do and like 6 things on our to-do list. It can blow you away when you have nowhere to be. It's a crazy feeling. And sometimes it's too much even for people. So when you're in that environment and you have nowhere to be, you get time to cook and create in a different way. And cooking around a campfire is one of the most beautiful, fun, rewarding things that the human mind and body can ever experience. And it's pretty much evaporated. It's probably, I would say, in the matter of like meals, it's probably 1 in a million. Probably 1 in a million meals in America are cooked over a campfire. It might be less, right? It might be 1 in 10 million. So that is one thing also that we dial into, is your ability and different tips and tricks and fire management, using different types of wood to get different types of coals, all these different things. And you get to cook these beautiful romantic meals over a fire. And it's one of the greatest feelings in the world. And I don't think a lot of folks probably never experience it in their whole life.
That's a really good point to share, just because that is probably very true, in the sense that there is like, like 1 in 10 million or so meals, if you really think about it, because how many people are A, seeking that out, and then B, we've already gotten into the point of our society where you show up at a campsite with dehydrated meals and a jet boil, yes, and that's exactly it. It's kind of just like you're almost making.
You pour it in your plastic. You mix it up with your plastic spoon, and then you eat out of your plastic. And
no, exactly, because like now taken just as lazy of an approach to eating in the wilderness. And the other aspect of too is you're creating trash. You're creating trash that you have to pack out, and most people don't. You know, people are already bad about shitting in the woods and not packing that out. And so it's just like, where have we gone? You know, it's sad, but at the same rate, I think that there's more people like yourself that are standing up for themselves and this community and showing people that you don't have to do that. You don't have to be like those people, and you can show people how to really like take care of themselves and be macronutrient, but not have to sacrifice so many other just kind of stupid things in the way to get yourself a good meal. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I've had that battle with myself a lot. I actually do not own a jet boil, period. I don't have a rocket stove. I don't have any of those. And I spend a lot of time in the backcountry. That's not to say that if you have that, you're wrong. It's just my personal preference is like, I kind of have two things. If I'm going fast, like a Colorado Trail FKT attempt, I'll prepare food and I'll go no cook. So if my goal is to be expedient, why cook at all, right? I don't have to wash dishes if I'm no cook. Like pinole would be a good example of no cook. You just mix it up with water, you can slug it down, you get calories. Or the opposite is like, if I'm moving at a slower rate, I'm going to use the fire. I'm going to dedicate myself to the practice of making a fire, whether it's with hand drill or bow drill or a ferro rod or however I create the fire. So that's like a piece of connection, and then cook on that same fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really cool because there's an aspect that people don't understand anymore about like overeating and just over consuming in general. And I think that that's interesting because you're dialing it back into a very primal way of living. You know, you're mentioning things as far as ancient grains to live off of in a way where people did that X amount of hundreds, maybe even thousands of years ago, where it's searching for the einkorn, for the X, for the Y, and all the things that are going to help you versus, oh man, I need to bring these gels and I got to get like this big like calorie intake. And here's all of my individual little packets of, you know, these liquid calories that are only made from things that are industrial. They're not natural. They're not coming from the land. So I think that's cool that you're teaching people kind of a mindset too of like, look, you don't need to come into this with like the whole kitchen sink. You're not thinking about it like hard enough, as well as what is your hard? What is hard to you? Because, you know, obviously there are people who, you know, they run ultra marathons and there's a big community of this thing with like the sport of it, of consuming like, you know, just not nutrient dense calories, a lot of sugar, and a lot of stuff that's bad for you. I see a lot of these aid stations and a lot of these like ultra marathon people that, you know, they got the 6-pack and the shiny skin and stuff, but they're intaking a bunch of garbage. So, and again, it's what you just said earlier to a point. It's not wrong. It's not wrong to do the hard ultras. It's not wrong to do marathons. It's not wrong to do any sort of like trail running or whatever, because that's just the way America, or however the community and the society is going to view the way of keeping people safe, I guess, you know, with plenty of, you know, this, that, and the third. But I just think it's cool that you're just putting yourself in this one man category where you're like, look, I'm not like, I'm doing, now I'm competing over the last couple of years. Now I'm starting to like get into more of the mainstream of it, but it's almost like you're doing this because you feel that there's, at least this is how I perceive it, we're not going to be around forever. And once we're gone, it's probably going to be X amount of time before people actually like forget about you. So I think it's really cool that you're building this legacy right now at such a young age to take into the next, X amount of years, because I feel like you're going to be like an old man with long white hair, just like still killing it, dude.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the thing that I run into most often with how people see me is that like I have to be binary. Like I'm either into running ultras or I'm into being like in the backcountry solo. And for me, it's like I don't draw that distinction the way other people do.
I don't see it.
And for example, like I use Peter Rabbits during my ultras, which are like these organic fruit squeezies, and they're similar to like a gel, but I just use fruit instead. It's like fruit and oats.
Wow.
And I'm using something that's like processed and it's got a plastic lid. And I don't think like I have to be eating only like berries on my 100-mile ultras just because that's the assertion that somebody may put on me as like the primitive guy. My thing is like, I'm going to do in the situations where I need performance, I'm going to do what I need to get that performance. And I'm also going to remember the old ways. That's what I'm trying to do, is honor and remember the old ways. Even if sometimes there is a better new technology or something that's more efficient that can help me, I'm going to take advantage of that. But I'm always going to try and remember the old ways.
I think that's a really great way to view it, because that's kind of, you said it better than anybody, because it's you. And that's what I was saying earlier, is that you're your own category, man. Like you have your own lens of looking at these things, where it's this very mixed approach of you speak up for the primitive way and the old ways, but you're not going to just say no. And like you said earlier, you don't shun anything, but the fact that, like I said, the fact that you choose to do these things and you choose to honor the old way first and foremost, I think is very commemorable. I think it's very admirable. And I think it's something that you stand in a very small category of people. And I think you should be proud of yourself, because there's a lot of people that are definitely honored by what you're doing.
I appreciate that. That means a lot. And yeah, I'm just going to try and do my best. The thing I've found out is that it doesn't sell. Like Nuance doesn't sell. It would sell much better if I was like, gotta be primal, everything else sucks. Like you're drinking poison if you don't have liver every day, all day. And, is like, if I took that approach, it would sell so much better. Or if I took the approach of like, fully embracing like being a professional athlete and trying my hardest and, all the details of like 21st century training and like biohacking, right? There's like two different spectrums, and I try and sit in the middle. And all the advices that I've got over my life has been like, you need to pick a niche, like you need to pick something.
Ride in one car.
I'm like, yeah, I feel like if the goal was just to build a following and have people look at my silly little videos, then that's what I would do. But I think my goal is more like build a life that I feel I want to live forever. And I feel like when I have the marriage of outdoor fitness and ancestral skills, that's something that I could do forever.
That's really cool. I mean, that's you being honest with you, which I think is the most important thing that a lot of people lose aspect in, because it's said too many times on social media as like a stupid quote or something, that The Rock is talking about. But the thief is the comparison of joy. It's the ultimate, comparison of joy. It'll take away all of the things that you really love about what you're doing. Don't compare yourself to anybody. Don't try to seek out to be, like you were saying, just niche. You don't have to be that, because what you're going to find is you are just straying away from your original authentic self.
Yeah. And it just doesn't seem sustainable. Yeah. I don't know if it is or not for folks on social media, because I'm honestly like pretty undereducated on like media in general. But me, I know that if I tried to do this thing, and I see it online all the time of like people that just try to act ultra like primitive, ultra primal while they're like on a cell phone. And it's like, you can't feel good about this like fake life you're living. Like that can't, I don't know. It can't feel great. And I think there's a lot of inauthentic characters who become super popular by just like selling this like blown out of proportion persona to the masses. Because you know what it is? It's because it's easy to understand and easy to capture. Like, this guy is Liver King, or this guy is, name it, X, Y, and Z. It's easy to attach. But if it's like, this is Brian Waterleaf, he's like kind of into fitness, but like kind of into food, and like likes to make these videos about smoothies, then it's like, okay, wait, that's a little bit, he's like too nuanced. I don't know what he is, right? And that's kind of how it is for me too. It's like, what is this character?
No, exactly. And that's the thing, is I'm not trying to be the main character or trying to play any sort of role into what anybody likes. I'm doing what I want to do. And because I have so much experience in different aspects of like being a chef and like working on the line and cooking for a living, and like having to make it a lifestyle, because it's what paid my bills for over a decade. It's like what really shaped me as a person. But then I also found that most of it is fueled on hard drugs, alcohol, a lot of, guilt and shame. And behind closed doors, a lot of the greatest people that I cooked under were the most dead inside, and the most sad and depressed, and just on the outskirts, just the most loved people, the most celebrated, the most, oh dude, you got it. Like, just getting pulled into so many directions of meeting people and needing to be a part of a community that they just despised, because you're putting on a show, you're putting on a fake, performance for a lot of people. And that's not every chef, but that's what I experienced a lot of, is that the higher I climbed in being a professional cook, the more I hated the word and the profession of being called a chef, because it's like that you find people who just label themselves in this way of, it's just like, dude, you're just an asshole that likes to cook, dude. Like, you just it sucks, because there are real chefs out there that should be forever, celebrated. And there's people who are not with us for other reasons, because that industry takes so much as opposed to how much it gives and how many thank yous that it gives. And so, it gets me emotional just to talk about it, but it's like interesting because I care about food so much and like have been affected by it so much that, I want to have these conversations with people and just open up that door to that lane of thinking, because nobody talks about how important food is. And it's one of the most detrimental things that's happening in our society right under our noses. And everybody just continues to kind of like go along with the performance, and nobody's calling anybody out on their bullshit just yet. Or the ones that do, it's like they're the only ones clapping in the middle of the woods. It's hard to hear.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is is a moot point.
It is,
because we argue about like, oh, like you should be high carb or you should be high fat, or it's calories in versus calories out, or no, it depends what kind of calories you have. And it's like, guys, like we're talking about things that will make like 2 to 3% difference, like in the margins. We're like, what matters is eating whole foods and moving your body. It's like, it always comes back to the same thing. It's like, move a lot and use like whole foods as much as you can as fuel. If you have a Snickers bar, great. Like you're not going to die. Like literally nothing's going to happen. Or if you want to eat high fat and your wife wants to eat high carb, great. Like you're both going to burn energy different ways. It doesn't, honestly, like you guys are arguing about things in the margin. And I think the issue is that that's what gets clicks. Like,
yeah, online, it's all about the clickbait.
But it's just it's not relevant. What's relevant is like, you got to move a lot and then like eat things as close to the source as possible, which like, I mean, that makes sense. It's not, the problem is the answer is too simple.
No, you're right. Because like if somebody was even going to ask you about, well, what are your nutritional goals this year? Like at the end of like some High Rocks event, you're just like, yeah, I just did it, dude. I ate whole food and I just moved my body a bunch. So like, it's simple.
And I was on runs and I also, I ate, gummy worms or something. And it's like, people are like, oh, like, are you just eating like berries? And it's like, not all the time. No, like it doesn't have to be this like all or nothing game. You don't have to be Mr. Carnivore. You don't have to be the girl who only eats vegetables. Like you can just eat relatively clean and move your body a lot and things will pretty much work out.
No, I agree with you. I was just talking to Austin about that, where his favorite thing to do when he summits like really high up is just pound some Sour Patch Kids. So it's like why, dude, why not? We're already 21st century humans that will process it just fine. So I think it's really great, this conversation today, just because you've been able to touch on so many aspects of like just being a normal guy, just being a person that exists right now. Somebody who is, I believe you're in your early 30s. And so it's like, yeah. Okay, cool. I'm 33. So I figured you might've been about my age, but regardless, late 20s, you're just existing as a person, but you're also tapping into these older ways and these more, tribalistic and primal thing, whatever you want to label them as, but it doesn't define you. And you're still, in a big city, breathing the same air as everybody. And I like that you touch on the fact that you're no more important than the next guy. You're just choosing to do these things.
Yeah, I'm just choosing to do it. I was lucky and I had some great mentors in the outdoors. And when it comes down to it, whenever somebody asks me, like why I do this stuff, it's because I've never felt more like my authentic self. When I'm walking around barefoot and, teaching a class, seeing people make friction fire for the first time, or discovering this plant that will cure the rash they have on their leg, or just soaking up the sunlight in a river super deep in the backcountry. Like those are the moments where it's like, I feel human. I don't feel like I'm being anyone that I'm not. And this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
That's great, man. That literally just answered my last question perfectly, of just, how you see yourself for the next foreseeable time. And it just seems like you're really like honing in on these present moments every day that chalk up to a lot of time, a lot of expanded time, and a lot of things that you spend with people. Like I thought it was so cool the other day to see your sister start a fire for the first time and you guys were in the backcountry. So I really think that you're tuning in to the right things, and you're also just enjoying life. Like if you and Lauren want to go do something that normal people do, you're probably going to go do it. And you also enjoy things like doing a cold plunge in the straight up river, and you guys also own an ice barrel. So it's like you have both worlds living. That I think you're having a great balance, and it looks great on you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And I just want to say, I think it's really cool what you're doing here. I know that you've had a big transformation yourself, and it's
we could have a whole podcast about that.
No, I know. And I could tell from the first time I met you that you were really trying to come into your own and live your life with as much purpose as possible. And I feel like this is a great avenue for that. So, I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you very much. That touches my heart deeply, just because, when we first met, I definitely was still coming out of like a different shell of my own. I was trying to find comfortability in the skin that I have currently. So it's a hard thing that I don't think people really think about much, because you identify with so much for so long. And then when you had to make as many drastic changes as I did, it just really puts you in the hot seat of thinking in that aspect and in that mindset. And I'm trying very, very hard. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that this is going to be a really fun journey for me to embrace. So thank you very, very much for saying that.
Absolutely, man. I look forward to hearing all your journey and your podcast coming up. This is going to be cool.
Thanks, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And this has been a lot of fun. So I will take us out now, my friend.
All right, guys. See you next time.
Yep. Thank you for joining me today on our flavorful journey here at Clean Plates. If you enjoyed our exploration into the world of food and the stories behind our eating habits, be sure to subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. And Ryan, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at ryan.quinn.mcguire, or you can find my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's called Who the Wild Things Are, and wild is spelled W-Y-L-D.
Beautiful. So don't forget to share your own food stories and your thoughts with me on my personal page of Brian Waterleaf and the Clean Plates podcast. And remember, every plate has a story, and we're here to discover them together. So stay curious, keep exploring, and continue to nurture your relationship with food. I'm Brian Romaine, and until next time, keep your plates clean and your hearts full. Thank you for joining me today on our flavorful journey here at Clean Plates. If you enjoyed our exploration into the world of food and the stories behind our eating habits, be sure to subscribe where you get your podcasts. And don't forget to share your own food stories on my personal page at Brian Waterleaf or the Clean Plates podcast page on Instagram. And remember, every plate has a story, and we are here to discover them together. So stay curious, keep exploring, and continue to nurture your relationship with food. I'm Brian Romaine, and until next time, keep your plates clean and your hearts full.